The political climate in Europe is expected to be a little more fragmented as a result of the European Union parliamentary elections as they keep rolling in. The centrist bloc may have lost a little ground to both the right and the left. Of course, the future of Brexit hangs in the balance. So where does Europe go from here? Conrad Black is an author and former newspaper publisher, of course, among other things. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Give me your analysis of what we saw here. There was an expectation that the center wouldn't hold, but it has held a little bit, right? It's being
I haven't seen the final results from the Euro elections, but Farage's party did do very well, didn't it? Mm-hmm. And ran well ahead of the Conservatives.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and across, we did expect, obviously, the folks on the right and the far left to make headway.
Yeah.
When it comes to the whole bloc and what it needs to do to actually stay relevant, there's this growing, Brexit is not the only evidence that the experiment may be in jeopardy. Is it safe?
You mean the whole political union?
The whole political union.
It's safe in the sense of not just cracking up in fragments right away. Yes, it's safe, but I think it needs reform. I think the basic problem is that the government in Brussels doesn't answer effectively either to the major constituent states, Germany, France, Britain, and Italy,
right,
or to its parliament in Strasbourg. So they're kind of a law unto themselves, generally run by Dutch, Belgians, and Luxembourgers, and they stir up a great deal of resentment. So you see, I think the common market worked beautifully, but superimposing political union, they had to either do it in one jump or leave it as a Europe of the sovereign states as de Gaulle wanted. But now they're straddling, and it's not working.
Is there a middle ground where you devolve the sovereignty in different ways to different
Yes, and that's what, when I was the chairman of the Telegraph, we always advocated. You have a common market for everyone and as much political integration as the others wished. And I think you'd get a solid German zone, mm-hmm. Germany and most of its immediate neighbors like Poland, the Czechs, Austria, and so on. And they would go for a political union, where the southern states and France would not.
We just today are learning that Italy will be offside again. Its covenants on debt to GDP, its budget may not pass muster. How serious is it?
Look, even when Rome ruled the known world, it didn't have a hard currency. They have never had a hard currency in Italy. It's a wonderful country. Its contribution to civilization is immense, but it's not fiscally a responsible place. But this isn't altogether disadvantageous to the Germans. They like having some weak countries in the euro because it makes it easier to export their engineered products.
Do you think the atmosphere inside the Eurozone is any different because the world's two largest economies are going toe-to-toe? In other words, is there a sense that we better be a little more cohesive over here because there's so much tension?
My impression is they're just worried without coming to any conclusions. They're just sort of dithering. I think of greater importance is Britain leaving is the second largest economy. It would be like, if you will, Quebec leaving Canada or Texas and California leaving the U.S. or something.
Yes.
It's a serious problem for them.
And one that's very much up in the air. What was your reaction to Theresa May's announced resignation?
Well, she had no choice. I mean, I think she did her best, but she made some terrible tactical errors. She called an election she didn't need and didn't win the election. And she made the classic mistake. Like, I hate to take cheap shots at a person who's tried hard, done her best, and it's not worked. I admire her as a person, but she made the mistake of communicating to the people she was negotiating with that she had to have a deal. And when you do that, whoever you're dealing with is going to put you to the wall. And she shouldn't have pulled the trigger to leave until she was confident she had a majority in her own parliament to produce something that Brussels would accept. So she got the sequence wrong.
And Boris Johnson as leader, what do you make of what would that mean for the rest of us?
We're coming down to I think you're under the constitution of the Conservative Party. You have a vote amongst the MPs, and the two top candidates then go to the paid-up members of the Conservative and Unionist Party. And you can't pack it like we sometimes get in these constituencies or provincial or even federal leadership meetings in this country. I mean, they freeze the membership, so it's genuine conservatives, not convenience voters. But presumably, from what we've seen now, half the people who've thrown their hat in the ring are Remainers and half are Leavers, which shows how divided the party is. But the Conservatives in the country are relatively pro-Leave. So one of the candidates will be a Leaver and one will be a Remainer. And the constituency associations are going to vote to leave. They did before and they still will. So I think Boris wins. And I think he leaves Parliament adjourned until October 31, and Britain's out. He's not going to negotiate with Brussels.
So a no-deal Brexit would be...
Which has been made a ludicrously over-feared outcome. I mean, it's not, the sky won't fall down.
People like Mark Carney, who says it will cause a severe recession.
Look, I have great liking and admiration for Mark, but he completely, I don't want to overstate it, but he went off the deep end, parroting the words of the former Chancellor George Osborne, saying there'll be grass growing in the streets in front of the Bank of England if it votes for Brexit. All rubbish. It's all rubbish. They can fast track into a better arrangement with the United States and Canada. Even Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader in the U.S. Senate, says he would support that. And it's a better market, faster growing market, and the Americans won't concede any sovereignty, so they don't ask anyone else to. What bothers the British is it's not, in this case, so much immigration, though that does worry them if it's abused. But I mean, they don't mind immigrants from Poland or someplace. It's the ones that are much harder to assimilate. But what bothers them is that there's this endless deluge of authoritarian directives from Brussels. Now, the Germans are accustomed to regimentation, and they're the most powerful country in Europe anyway, so they don't notice. The French and Italians generally consider government a bloody nuisance, most politicians to be crooks and scoundrels anyway, and they ignore what they do, so they don't notice. But the British like to obey the law, but they want reasonable laws. So
they chafe.
Yeah, so, it doesn't fit for them.
I want to ask you how you think our government has been doing. I mean, we're obviously caught in the middle of a lot of moving parts over which we have zero control. But have we taken a strong enough stand where China is concerned, for instance?
I have to say on that one, I think the government has behaved reasonably. I mean, I may have missed some of the fine points, but it seems to me they've stuck resolutely to we will allow our courts to function and we won't tinker with the system.
Right.
And I don't think you can fault them for that. And if the Chinese think they can bully us by threatening to execute Canadians they round up in China, they're not going to. And if they do anything like that, I think the world would support us in drastic countermeasures against China. And I think it is instructive how quickly the Chinese reach for the bullying option. And the fact is, they're not as strong. They're not nearly as strong a country as the United States, and they're going to have to be careful.
Before we let you go, we have not talked on the air since you were pardoned by U.S. President Donald Trump. How does your world change? There's still a restriction on you from owning a public company. Can you reverse any of that, or is it?
No, there isn't a restriction on owning a public company. There's a restriction on my being a director of a public company. In point of fact, I think I could challenge that if I wanted to. Now, I've designed my career around it. It doesn't affect me very much. But I think, but the two aren't particularly related. And I could have gone to the United States before if I'd applied.
Right.
But I was so disgracefully treated by their system there, I didn't feel the urge to apply.
You will have now a literal card that says you're free to pass. But do you worry when you meet those people at the border who aren't always the best well read?
I have a copy of the Act of Pardon and the original copy of the implementation of the Act by order of the President, and I will have them reduced so I have them in case anyone wonders. It's not so much in the U.S. where officially, as of now, I was never charged with anything. It is when you get to, for example, Australia, and they say, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And I will say no, but I'll have this in case they have a record that I was, just so that I can square it.
All right. Well, you must be gratified. What will you do?
Yes. Well, and the president made it very clear that, we've known each other a long time, and I don't think he was aware that I wrote a book about him, by the way, despite what some newspapers have said. But he is aware that I've written supportive pieces about him. And he said, but my motive is, and he had the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, there when he said it, is that the White House counsel and his legal team went right through the case, and Alan Dershowitz and some other lawyers sent in an analysis for me, and they went right through it. They went right through everything, and they concluded I should never have been charged. There was no crime. None of us was guilty. It was all nonsense.
The only thing I could never understand was how you could forgive him for his boorishness where women were concerned. And boorishness is putting it lightly. It's so out of keeping with your character. I could never understand that.
My admiration for his wife is such that it caused me to be convinced that he was a reformed person.
Conrad, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Conrad Black, author and former newspaper publisher.